Vanderbilt's defense will feature a lot of stars, especially one that's flying under the radar.
You are Locked On Vandy, your daily podcast on the Vanderbilt Commodores, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome into the Locked On Vandy podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Corey Burton. Thanks for making Locked On Vandy your first listen, and thanks for making us part of your day, and shout out to the everydayers. In today's episode, we're going to turn to the linebacker room. Yesterday, we talked about tight ends. Today, it's all about the linebackers. To me, this is a special group that has a lot of depth and playmaking ability, and no matter how you want to look at the definition of a linebacker, this group is deep. One inside linebacker is flying under the radar and will be very productive for Vanderbilt. And how does this affect the expectations of the overall linebacker position, inside backers and outside backers alike? Also, Steve Gregory takes over the defense this year. How do we feel about the direction of this unit? Well, we're going to break it all down in this episode, so stay tuned. Thanks for making Locked On Vandy your first listen each and every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube as a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bets or win your first $5 bet wins. So, talking about linebackers, I feel like speaking of bets, that's a sure bet with this Vanderbilt crew, right? And I think when you break down the position and when you break down the defense, everything's going to be talked about the defensive backs, right? You have Martell Height, you have Randon Fontenette, who is kind of a hybrid DB linebacker, star position, wherever you classify that as. Probably more so lumped in with the defensive backs. You have Dante Carter, Marlon Sewell, CJ Hurd at the safety position. You have Jalen Lackey. You have transfer Jordan Matthews coming in at corner. Like, you have a lot of guys in the defensive backfield that, for rightfully so, they require a lot of attention. They command a lot of attention and command a lot of respect. And so that's going to be a very special unit within this defense. But I think a unit, I wouldn't say they're being overlooked, but they're a unit that's probably got a lot of star power that no one really quite understands because they're not flashy. Like, this group is not flashy. Like, Langston Patterson is so good, so instinctual, so gifted that he just gets the job done. You don't even realize he's getting the job done, right? But you have other guys like the outside linebacker position. We'll talk a little bit about that, about how they can make the difference. But I want to talk about a breakout star. I want to talk about somebody that is flying under the radar. Not a lot of people are talking about, but I think is going to have a monster year on this Vanderbilt defense. It's not Langston Patterson. He is definitely not flying under the radar. It's Bryce Cowan. It's definitely Bryce Cowan. Now, here's why. Because when you look at Bryce Cowan, I mean, just look at the specimen that he is. He is an absolute physical freak. The reason he's flying under the radar and he's not a superstar is because statistically, he hasn't been able to put it all together, right? He's 6'4". He is 230 pounds, and he played in 13 games, and he had one start. He finished with 16 tackles, 2 pass deflections, and had a pick 6 in 2023. Like, he's had 30. His stats, like, they're not going to wow you. So you're probably thinking, okay, who is this guy, right? Why is he going to be a star? Why should I believe that he's going to be a star? Because when you have a defense that was as much of a mess as it was in 23, nobody was good on that defense. Obviously, you lose 10 games, and you lose them in the fashion you lose them in. No one's really good. No one you would really consider coming off that defense going, okay, I am supremely confident in this guy. CJ Taylor, okay. Dareke Wright, sure. Langston Patterson, yeah. And then they proved it in 2024. And they proved that you put them in the right scheme, these guys can really excel. Bryce Cowan, I just think his development was stunted because he just hasn't had the opportunity to be in a stellar defense that really showcases his abilities. I think now that he's got some footing now, which is good. And I think he's going to be a breakout star because of that. His physical gifts, his athleticism, his natural knack for he's still learning how to play the linebacker position. Let's not forget that. He's still trying to figure out the nuances of the scheme. He's still trying to figure out what Steve Gregory wants, what Clark Lee wants from him. He's still trying to figure out how he's playing, how he's transitioning from Mike to Will. And those are terms for the strong side and weak side inside backers. And he's trying to figure out, because you're asked to kind of cover different things within those, with those positions, right? In an odd front, you're covering B gap, B to C, and you're just kind of, actually you're A, B, C, and you're expected to cover all of those gaps. But depending on what Clark Lee or depending on what the defensive coordinator wants to do with the defensive line in any given scheme, their responsibilities could change. They have to be, in other words, they have to be more versatile. And he's a guy that I think learning from Mike to Will, I think some of the other opportunities that he had, like when he flashed really great plays. He showed you in some instances that he has a ton of ability. But now it's all about putting it together this year, and I think that he will. He showed in this picture right here. He creates a turnover against Kentucky, gets an interception. Very excited about it. I think you're going to see more of that. I mean, this guy's getting more and more comfortable each and every snap, each and every series, each and every game. He had a phenomenal spring practice period. Like, you know how I talked about Bryce Coleman in the last episode? Well, Bryce and Coleman didn't really do much last year. Wasn't a name that was on anybody's radar coming into the spring or even halfway through the spring, but he became somebody that developed instantly, became uncoverable, become unguardable, and really became a force for Vanderbilt's offense. I think Bryce Cowan can do something similar on Vanderbilt's defense. He's somebody that had some chances. He's had a lot of action. He's seen a lot of action, but he just, for whatever reason, has not put it together. And just that seasoning, just that extra time in the film room, being in the same position coming off for last year, playing alongside Langston Patterson, he fought his way into that position, and he has fought his way into the starting lineup that I think he is, between him and Brian Longwell, I think you have a really good trio if you count Langston Patterson. I think no matter what combination of guys you have in there, and even throw in Nick Rinaldi because he's going to bounce between inside and outside, you have a really good group of four guys that I think could really play at a high level. And so these guys all kind of feed off each other, and they're all going to make plays. And you're going to look up and go, oh, Bryce Cowan, he made another play. Like, you're going to read these reports, and it's going to be Bryce Cowan with 10 tackles, Bryce Cowan forced fumble, Bryce Cowan interception. Like, I think because of the defensive scheme is improving. I think being in year 2, and yeah, Steve Gregory's calling it. It's not going to be Clark Lee calling the defense, but really it's Clark Lee's defense. It's a scenario kind of like what they have down at Georgia with Kirby Smart and Glenn Schumann. Yeah, Glenn Schumann's the defensive coordinator. Yeah, Glenn Schumann's calling the defensive plays, but we really all know where this is coming from. It's the same thing at Vanderbilt. Steve Gregory's calling it, but we all know where the source of it's coming from. It's coming from Clark Lee. And Clark Lee called it and coordinated it last year, trained Steve Gregory. And so I think you're going to see, kind of like what you're going to see on offense, you're going to see an advancement of the scheme. And I think it's because you're getting more athletic at that position, at every position really, but you're getting more athletic at inside linebacker. Langston Patterson is that veteran piece that's going to command that group, and everyone's going to fall in line. And I think Bryce Cowan's going to be a huge, huge breakout star. Bet on it. I don't know if you can, but bet on it. And speaking of betting, we're going to talk about FanDuel. But before we get into that, this defense, like I said, this linebacker core is going to be amazing. I'm going to tell you how they're going to be a difference-making position group. I'm going to tell you that next. Hey, you know how I said bet on it? Well, here you go. You just go to FanDuel.com and you can definitely bet on it, right? And yeah, the NBA finals are over, but that doesn't mean you can't get into the summer sports. They're in full swing. You're talking about baseball under the lights. You got some great golf, high stakes soccer with Gold Cup and Club World Cup, all that stuff. FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. Man, you're already following the action. Why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned on the beach. Or you can get sunburned on the beach and then come and follow a game live, right? So, like, I'm looking at these odds right here. I'm looking at San Francisco at the Arizona Diamondbacks, right? FanDuel has these really good already made same game parlays. This is really good. And Rafael Devers, he's gonna need to record an RBI. Gerald Perdomo needs to record 2 total bases. Logan Webb needs to have 7+ strikeouts, and the Giants need to win by more than 1 run. And I think that's plus 2128, that's plus 2,128 odds on that. So a $10 wager on that will get you $212. Man, that's awesome. Man, I've been using FanDuel to track my favorite matchups, and the app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions and fun ways to bet. It's easy to use, fast to pay out, and it makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. Based on that, I believe it. Whether I'm placing a same-game parlay or watching a bet right into the 9th inning, FanDuel makes it feel like I am part of the action. So, are you new to FanDuel? Well, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, welcome back. Thanks for making Locked On Vandy your first listen each and every day. Shout out to the everydayers. Thanks for making us part of your day. Thanks for everything you do and making this show what it is. If you need a second listen, Locked On SEC with Chris Gordy, place to go. Covers the best league in all the land. So we were talking about the linebacker position, and one guy I had in particular that was going to really, really push the envelope. He's flying under the radar. Bryce Cowan, I think he's going to be a breakout star this year. He's going to put it all together because, honestly, I think it's because the linebacking core is going to be better all around. I think you're going to have more guys that are going to give him more opportunity to really, really make a difference, right? You have Langston Patterson, you have Brian Longwell, you have Nick Rinaldi, you have your 2 guys on the edges, Keanu Coate and Miles Capers. Like, you have a lot of options there to really put yourself in a position as a group to thrive in the SEC. Like, you have some really good pass rushers. So how's this linebacking core going to make a difference on the entire team in 2025? Now, here's the thing. I think when you look at this defense as a whole, one of the things we had to kind of look backwards before we can move forward with this 2025 projection here. But I think when you look at this defense in retrospect, one of the biggest things they lacked was defensive line and front line depth, right? They had in 23, they had little to no depth. Guys would get banged up, guys would get tired, guys would get uninterested, and you really had nothing there. You had guys that weren't playing hard. You had guys that couldn't play. You had guys that when they got gassed and they just couldn't hold out. 2024, you have a major roster overhaul, major philosophy overhaul, major everything overhaul. And you felt the effects of that. There was so much new stuff. You had to kind of get used to it. There's a new way of doing things, a new way of calling the defense, new terminology. It was like starting over. And when you start over, offense went through similar woes. They did a lot of this. So the defense couldn't get off the field on 3rd down. Why? Because they had no depth. They were tired. They couldn't put pressure on the quarterback with the front 4. So the linebackers were really more called on to do a lot of blitzing. And they did a lot of run blitzing. They did a lot of pass blitzing. Like, they just didn't have the bullets in the gun to really get after the quarterback. When those ran out, it just became, okay, what's next? Well, we have to throw bodies at it because teams are gashing us. Like South Carolina started gashing them. LSU started gashing them. Tennessee started gashing them. Teams started gashing them through the air, on the ground. Like there was no third down that seemed insurmountable for an opponent. And there was no third down where you felt, especially as the season wore on, there was no third down where you felt like, okay, here we go. Like this is like third down was not a comfortable down, just so to speak. And so that I think is changing because you're a little bit deeper now. You have guys like Bryce Cowan was still very inexperienced, and it showed. Brian Longwell, he got lost at times, relatively inexperienced, struggled a bit in times. Langston Patterson can't do it all by himself. You had Miles Capers get banged up. You had Nick Rinaldi can't do it by himself. Like these guys were just not producing because they were gassed, inexperienced. They just didn't know, and they were still learning a new way of doing things. And so, when you look at it that way, it's growth, it's development. Those are reps that are going to be valuable this year. They know what to expect. They know how teams are going to try to attack. They've made it a point to build on the defensive line and get better quality guys. So when you really kind of look at how they're built, that is going to lend itself to having a more productive group. Let's look at kind of what I think the keys are to success for this linebacking core. Now, here's kind of why I think, because your scheme with the rebuilt defensive line, I think Clark Lee and Steve Gregory are going to be able to do more things that are going to free up the linebackers. I think they're going to, especially the inside guys, they're going to play really, really free. And so when I wrote these out, this was more geared towards the inside linebackers. I think the outside linebackers, we know what they've got to do. Get to the quarterback, close down the edge, tighten everything, and funnel everything back inside. Those are the main goals for the outside guys. Sacks and squeeze every run down into the C, B, and A gaps, right? And so the linebackers, the inside backers, Langston Patterson, Bryce Cowan, Brian Longwell, Nick Rinaldi, if he's in there, they need to be a force in the run game, be gapping out, right? So I think your defensive line is going to cover the A gaps. I think they're going to make it a point that these linebackers are super athletic, super gifted. They don't have to run downhill, even though I think Bryce Cowan can. So they have to be a force in the run game, B gap and out. I think if it's in the A gap, I think they're going to have it covered, but they need to be able to scrape and they need to be able to have opportunities to get over the top and really chase things inside out. And the outside guys need to funnel that to them where everything gets kind of put into a cylinder. I think they need to be better at that. They weren't good enough at that, especially in the center of the defense. They weren't good enough at being a force in the run game because I think they were too busy being a force. I think they were too busy trying to figure things out and figure out how to stop the pass at the same time. They were just kind of overwhelmed, it seemed like a lot of times. And then that brings me to my second point. They have to be more of a factor in pass coverage. And I think a lot of it is they're going to have opportunities to do so. I don't think they had as many opportunities last year because they were called on to blitz a lot out of necessity because they had no other way of getting to the quarterback. They felt like they had to throw bodies at opposing quarterbacks, and they had to throw bodies in run lanes that they couldn't really be a factor and play the linebacker position. They were just on the run. They were just going to go. They were just going to be there. I think they've got to be more intentional on how they let these linebackers play. And then, of course, they need to find ways to create takeaways, ultimately help the defense get off the field on third down. I just think they need to be the leaders out there. They need to be the ones affecting the change. They need to be the ones making the calls. They need to be the one getting these defensive linemen where they need to go, and they need to be seeing the tendencies up front with the opposing offenses. They need to figure out down and distance stuff. They need to do a lot of good film prep, which I'm sure they do, but that's just something they need to improve on and continue to improve on as the year goes on. So I'm really excited about this group. I think this, especially the inside linebackers, I think they're athletic enough to be able to make plays, C gap to C gap. I think they're going to be a bigger force in pass coverage. I don't think they're going to make as much of a difference, at least on the inside portion, in the pass rush. And I think that's going to be a good thing overall for the position because they don't have to worry about that. They just drop in their zones and they figure out how to get off the field on third down. So that's going to be something that we look at. And when we look in retrospect on the 2025 season, we're going to be like, well, the reason why this defense was better and more productive was because the linebackers were able to play linebacker and not be in blitz mode so much. So that's kind of how I see this group. Now, the defense as a whole, what are really our expectations? We've talked about it before. We've never really, has anything changed? Do we feel differently about what our expectations are going from Clark Lee to Steve Gregory calling it, adding all these pieces, how they mesh all together? Like, how do we feel about this defense? We're going to talk about that next. Don't go anywhere. All right. Thanks for making Locked On Vandy your first listen. We are wrapping up the show here. We are having so much fun here on the Locked On Vandy podcast that it absolutely flew by. So I'm very excited about this. If you need, like I said, if you need a second listen, Locked On SEC, Locked On Portal. Like if you want to know what's going on in the portal, Brian Smith does a phenomenal job there. And then, of course, our list of shows from around the conference, the other 15 shows in the conference are absolutely outstanding. So make sure you are checking those out. Now, this has been my take for quite some time here. We're going to have the breakout star in this defense is going to come from the linebacker room. All right, I think it's going to be Bryce Cowan. And I'm very excited about how the linebackers, and we talked about how the linebackers are going to make a huge, huge difference in this defense because they're going to be the key pieces that's going to help this defense vastly improve their third down efficiency, meaning getting off the field on third down. That's the number one goal for this entire defense. If you can get off the field on third down, your offense can go to work. All right. And when you talk about expectations from Steve Gregory, I think that's the first thing you got to look at. How do we get there? How do we get off the field on third down? How do we manage that? That's going to be the questions that a lot of people have on the forefront of their mind coming into this season. And if you can't make that happen, I think it's going to be a very long season. I don't foresee that happening because I think you got more talent, you've got more depth, and you've got year two of continuity. That's the biggest thing, continuity. I think everyone coming back, you have a bunch of starters coming back, didn't lose much in the portal, gained a lot from what you did lose in the portal, or what you did lose from graduation in the portal. And I think it's going to overall be a great success. Now, for Steve Gregory, what does that look like? Okay. What does that look like? What do we have to improve with Steve Gregory at the helm to feel good about where this defense is and to feel good about Clark Lee's decision to give up the defensive play calling? Well, like I said, the first thing you have to do is get off the field on third down. Now, getting off the field on third down means getting pressure on the quarterback, Now, there's different ways to do that. There's different ways to be able to put stress on a quarterback. And you don't necessarily have to throw 7 bodies at him all the time to do that. Bill Belichick, who's probably one of the greatest coaches of all time in any level of football, proved that you don't necessarily have to throw bodies at the quarterback. You just disrupt the timing and affect his weapons. I think that's another way of doing it. So I think there's ways that you can do some things. You can disrupt their rhythm by stopping them on first down, constantly putting them behind the sticks. You can, I think if you win first down, if you can get them in the second down and keep them in third and long, I think if you can get them to third and long, you have a better chance of getting off the field. I think if you can step in front of a few passes, create a few fumbles, start creating turnovers again, I think if you can come out of this season the way you did last season with a +9 turnover ratio, I think you're going to have a lot of success on this defense. And that was the biggest key to them being good in 2024 was they created a lot of turnovers. They were opportunistic, they were athletic, and they were able to take advantage of mistakes. Now, there was plenty of mistakes on Vanderbilt's end. Like the Virginia Tech game was a close game, was an overtime game because of a few coverage busts. There was a massive coverage bust that started a rally for Virginia Tech. You can't have those in year two. right? You have to be on the same page. You have to have guys. You have too many guys now. You have too many cornerbacks out of the portal. You have too many guys that you can rely on now that you cannot have those busts. You can't have guys in there that are going to leave a guy wide open for a 75-yard touchdown where there's no one within 75 yards of him, right? You cannot have those coverage busts. You cannot have a corner playing cover 2 with a safety playing cover 3. Like a guy in the middle of the field and a low corner, it's not a good mix. The guy just ran right up the freaking sideline and it was over, right? You got to have guys that are good at the point of attack, physical, can press if you're going to play man coverage, can get hands on a receiver and rough up a receiver. You've got to have guys that can disrupt and understand that you have to disrupt timing of these receivers' releases. If you're going to play any man coverage, you have to be able to do that. You have to have guys that play into their role. You have to be solid against the run. You have to funnel everything back into the cylinder of the defense, and you have to shore up the middle. Too many runs up the middle last year. I think too many A-gap runs were successful for the opponent, and I think you need to fix that. However that is, you need to fix that, whether it's dedicating defensive linemen to those gaps and having the linebackers play over the top to B to C, or vice versa. However you want to do that, I think that's the thing that Steve Gregory has to understand. How do we shut down the middle of the defense? How do we funnel everything to the B and C gap from the outside to in and from inside to out? How do we force teams into where we want them to go? How do we affect the quarterback without having to blitz 6 or 7 guys every single time? How do we get our linebackers to have elite pass coverage? How can we affect throwing lanes? Well, you got to have more bodies in throwing lanes, first of all. If you blitz everybody, you're really taking a lot of risk. And if you don't get home on those blitzes, it's over. So I think teams picked up on that last year. Teams picked up that we were blitzing a lot because we had to. They were picking it up. They were able to convert 3rd and 12 with ease because they would just throw it to where the other guy wasn't. And they knew it. They knew exactly what was happening. They knew exactly what was coming. And Vanderbilt became very predictable out of necessity. And right, wrong, or indifferent, it's just the way it was. When you don't have a ton of depth and you have a lot of injury and you play in a league like this, which you're going to get a lot of bangs and nicks and cuts and scratches and whatever, and you're going to get a lot of guys that are going to miss sometime. I'm not saying you're getting all these catastrophic injuries, but you're having injuries that will sideline a guy for a game or a quarter or 2 games or whatever the duration is. Opposing offenses were able to take advantage of that and really formulate their attack to attack that weakness because there was a lot of drop-off to the next in line. This year, there's not so much drop-off. This year, there's a lot more experience. There's a lot more guys playing that have instincts, that have years under their belt within this system, that understand what this group is, to understand what Clark Lee's trying to do, to what Steve Gregory in turn is trying to do. Now, Steve Gregory calling it, I think he's got to get a better feel. Like there were some games where it makes sense that Clark Lee stopped calling the defense the last 3 games. It made sense hearing that because it was a little haywire, it was a little clunky, it was a little overly conservative even for Clark Lee. I just think, and Steve Gregory needed the seasoning, but I think there is, there's got to be an improvement of the flow of the game defensively, and it's not a preparation thing. I think it's an in-game adjustment thing. I think it is it's a comfort level thing. As a coordinator myself, I had to do the same thing. I had to go through the same growing pains. He's doing it in the SEC. I just did it in TSSAA. So there's huge difference there. Not criticizing him, for sure, not criticizing him. But I just think that's a factor. You have a brand new coordinator who's trying to get his feet wet, who's trying to learn his way, who's trying to figure this thing out. I think it's a great thing. And I think he'll be better for it. He'll be better for that 28-7 butt kicking South Carolina gave us. I think he'll be better for that. I think he'll be better for the second half collapse against Tennessee and the second half woes against LSU. I think he'll be better learning how to call games in those situations because those games weren't runaways. They just got away from him a little bit, and we ended up losing those. They weren't runaways, though, which is good, which is promising. You have a brand new coordinator who is calling games, and they're not runaways. You don't want to lose them, but, like, he's going to be better. He's just going to be better because of that. He has a better understanding of how teams want to attack, and I think he's got more weapons at his disposal. I think this is going to be a really, really good year. I think you're going to have better so I'm going to finish by saying this. I'm expecting the defense, and I think that they will accomplish this, but my expectations are this. Get off the field on third down, first and foremost. Get off the field on third down. Continue to get takeaways. Continue to create those opportunities. You did a lot of that last year. You were +9 in turnover ratio. Do that again. Run that back. That was good. And then number 3, limit the catastrophic preventable mistakes. Those were killer last year. The penalties, the miscommunications that led to wide open opportunities for the other team or one-on-ones that they should have never been in. Looking at you, Georgia State game. Those kind of situations. Avoid those. Limit those. There's going to be a bust here or there. They're humans, but make sure those busts aren't catastrophic. Try to limit those as best you can. I think this will be, you'll look back on this defense and go, wow, because this is a talented group. But there's got to be some things that fall into place. And it's all about how you get off the field on third down. That's the number one goal. If you can do that, I think you'll see that everybody will be happy because you'll be winning more. So that being said, linebackers, the key to this whole thing, they're going to have a huge year. Bryce Cowan under the radar. He is a breakout star. Look forward to seeing him play. Look forward to seeing him put it all together. And speaking of put it all together, we're going to put it all together on the next episode. We'll see you back here next time. Locked on Vandy. Thanks for listening. Anchor down. Like, subscribe, whatever it is you do, however you got here. I appreciate you. See you next time. Peace.